Kristen Knowles is here with us today. She will get a proper introduction, but on behalf of WLI Nashville, I did want to really thank you for coming out in person and meeting with our members and giving us your expertise. So thank you, Kristen. Proper introduction of Kristen will be from our WLI co-chairs, Laura Bean and Tara Myers from here at ESA Earl Swenson Architects. Laura and Tara have been on our steering committee for a number of years. They are our current co-chairs and run that group and deliver so many levels and channels of programming, whether it's the book club, Studio After Dark, this PD series, under their leadership. What's that?
Coffee Connect.
Coffee Connect. All of these things for our women members. Guys are allowed to come to professional development, but that's the only one. And we're really glad you all are here. So thank you for that leadership. You really make that initiative such a strong part of our district council. Besides our chairs who will properly introduce Kristen, they've opened up their firm to us, and you know, besides barely going anywhere for the last year and a half, let alone ESA, I forgot how marvelous a space this is. So thank you for hosting us today in your wonderful office. In addition, ESA is our WLI sponsor for 2021. So check, check, check. Leadership, hosting, and sponsor. I do want to thank in absentia Jessie Brown with Hastings, because Jessie is the subcommittee chair of our professional development subcommittee. And it was Jessie's initiative that introduced us all to Kristen and got Kristen to come, and now Jessie went away on her honeymoon. But in her stead, and not on her honeymoon, will be Laura Bean to properly introduce Kristen. So, Laura, take it away.
Actually, I'm just going to take this off too. I'm Tara Myers. I am a principal here at ESA, and we just wanted to welcome everybody. We're glad that we're finally back having some semblance of normal here with an event in person, and we're really happy all of you could come today to join us for this program. So welcome to ESA, and hope you, I'm really looking forward to this, Kristen. I am excited to get a lot out of this, so thank you guys for joining us today.
Yeah, I'll echo that, Tara. I mean, it's great to see everybody in person, even if behind a mask. And we do want to welcome Kristen. Kristen is just a great find, so I really am very grateful for Jessie for finding her. She has been a leader and a speaker for many, many years. She developed or founded her company Brave Enough in 2015 and has won a number of global awards for her work. She works with corporations to develop leaders and kind of help shape company culture. She works as an executive coach. She also works with just individual upcoming leaders in addition to things like this, acting as a speaker. So we felt like when we were talking to her and talking through all the different topics that she has so generously procured and developed over the years, we really did feel like this was very timely, and in this great kind of change of COVID and all of the employment turmoil and the I Quit movement, we felt like this was a great topic to really kind of hone in on and see what we can all do, because we can all, even if you're not going to quit, we can all find our different passions, and we can all kind of improve our status, whether it's in leadership or just in kind of moving forward with our careers in a better goal and sense of purpose. So with that, I want to send it off to Kristen. Oh, and I guess make sure you guys have one of these. If you don't, Kate in the back, acting as Vanna White, will pass one off. And I'll turn that over to Kristen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, ULI, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So let's talk about this big topic. We hear purpose, right? It's a very elusive term. And what does that mean? Especially in this whole idea of the Great Resignation, which I'm sure isn't a new term. I think most of us have heard that going on so far. And so I actually started looking at this idea of the Great Resignation, or Year of I Quit, towards the beginning of this year. It was around January and February, back when actually there were still a lot of people who were furloughed, a lot of layoffs were still happening. But it really was something that I identified early on of, hey, we actually need to be preparing for this. We're about to be on the cusp of something we've probably never seen before, as far as one of the greatest talent shortages, one of the great resignations across the globe in every industry. We probably will actually not see anyone unaffected by it. And at the time it seemed a little bit like, what are you talking about? Our unemployment rates are like in the tank, they're dismal right now. There's no way that people are leaving jobs. However, I think we have to ask why this is happening for us to understand what's going on. And I think it begs us to understand why, because we can't really solve something unless we understand what's at the core of it, right? And so I started asking a lot of why is this happening earlier this year? Like, why are we starting to see this transpire? And going back, I was thinking about 2020. And during that time, my firm actually switched to, we didn't switch, but we added a new layer. Previously, we had only done consulting and leadership development. But we decided to add coaching to our list of services, mostly because everyone we were talking to were feeling this place of, I am ill-equipped to handle what I'm going through in the pandemic. Whether that was, I don't know how to lead my team through this, or I don't know how to process all of a sudden my personal, my professional life are being thrown together and intertwined, and I'm not leaving my house. And it was actually starting to uncover some deep questions that people were asking, questions that we had probably long ignored for a really long time. Because pre-pandemic, it was a lot easier to kind of not ask ourselves, what am I doing with my life, right? Am I even happy with what I'm doing? Does this line up with my values? And so when I was thinking about it, the thing that first came to mind was going through a breakup. Now, how many people here have gone through either a really hard, painful breakup, maybe divorce, or maybe you lost a parent or a significant other or a friend, something that was very life-altering? Has anyone gone through something of that nature? Right, I think most of us have. So I was thinking about that, thinking about my own story. So in 2007, I actually was divorced. I got married very young. I had married my high school sweetheart, and it was a very unhealthy relationship. And going through that experience, I did what most people, at least most females, do when they go through a bad breakup or a divorce. I chopped all my hair off, right? So first things first, that has to go. I don't know why, but that's like the very initial thing that we all have to do. I changed my entire appearance, my wardrobe, my style. I quit my job. I decided to go on sabbatical. I traveled the world. Like, it was this deep desire to change almost everything about what was going on in my life. And our reasoning behind that is that, psychologically speaking, when we are going through something that is life-altering, we end up feeling internally, we have these very traumatic scars that take place, right? We feel very much like we cannot go back to who we were before. And most of the people I talk to when we think about the pandemic, there's almost a subtlety of, there was like a pre-pandemic me and like a post. And feeling this place of, I don't know if I can pretend to go back to how things were at this point. And when that happens, we often want to have external change to represent what's happening internally inside us. And we collectively, as an entire generation, just walked through that on a global scale. And I don't think we've actually had that level previously, at least not in a way that we were so connected, right? Even in past pandemics, we didn't have social media, many of the other layers where we were watching this take place at such a grand scale. And then on top of that, we layer on a huge amount of division that we were going through. right? We had political issues, we had social justice issues, how do we handle the pandemic? All of these things toppled on top of each other. There really is kind of this pre and post. And I don't think any of us could say that we walked out of this unscathed, at least in some shape, form, or fashion. I think all of us know someone who got sick. Maybe we got sick. We had people that didn't make it. We watched our friends, we watched our family, our colleagues lose jobs, get laid off, not know how they were going to make ends meet, right? There was a huge level of impact that I think all of us know someone if we weren't personally impacted by this. And so looking at that, we now have to think, okay, what does this have to do with purpose, and why are we seeing this? And I think that what it is that we are needing to desperately show an external aspect of what's happened to us internally. And so the same way that, the breakup, for some reason we would cut our hair off, I think a lot of people are actually now saying, okay, I'm quitting my job, or I'm asking myself these really hard questions that I ignored for far too long, like, what is my purpose? Or is what I'm doing even line up with my values? Like, what are my life goals? It's no longer just about what are my career goals. I have to actually think about, like, is this worth it in the long run? What do I want my life to look like in balance? How do I want to show up in all these different areas? And so when we do that, we're actually seeing what takes place. Sometimes we have a gut reaction to be like, I quit, I'm quitting my job. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And I think that's the thing that I'm really passionate about, is working with people. Sometimes it's helping them figure out, do they need to make a change and do they need to exit? Or is it more actually about grounding into and connecting to our deeper purpose and how we were able to start living that out in your current role, in your current job, and in your life, in your personal life, and in every area. And so that's kind of the work that I love to do with people, is helping them to really identify their purpose and connect to that and start living it out immediately, and then being able to put career goals around that. And that's what I love doing. It's what I get to do when I'm working in clients or working in some of our groups that we do. And so let's talk about purpose, because it's a very much elusive thing, right? It's this big word. We get a lot of things mixed up with it. There's a lot of misinterpretation of what purpose is. So we're going to level set on like what it is and what it isn't. When I first started studying and researching purpose, it was in 2018. So previously to that, I had been leading leadership development programs and had the opportunity to lead some incredible coaching and leadership programs. They have gone on to win many awards, and for me, I deeply wanted to understand, looking at our participants, you could see certain people who went through programs and they were deeply impacted. There was massive transformation. They would take it back to their teams, and you would see this like long-term effect. And then we would have other people who would go through the same program, the exact same cohort, so they're having roughly the same experience, and there would be no change. And I was like, what is the difference? Like, why do some people go through this and have change and others don't? What is the core? And so I really wanted to dig in to figure out what was causing this. And so I was doing that and going back and researching the hundreds of participants we had gone through these programs. One of the key things that stood out in our research when we were digging into it was the ones who had the most transformation were the ones who were connected to purpose. They would talk about what they did from a place of not like, what are my career goals and like what are the levels I want to get to and the promotions I want to have, but it was more around a deep sense of feeling called to do this, right? Wanting to invest in people's time. They talked about it from this like either calling or deep innate purpose, so to speak. And so that was really interesting to me. I was like, okay, so if that's the case, how do we help people become purpose-driven before putting them through programs? Like, how do we actually do that first? How do we get to, helping people to identify and connect with their purpose, which is a big question to ask. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So just be careful when you're like, I want to decide to, conquer world peace and achieve that. It's sometimes you're in over your head, but it was a really deep learning for me of like, this is something that we hear people always wanting to identify. How do we help people do this? And what does that actually look like? And what is it not? So through this research, the other thing that really stood out was the people who were most what we call living from purpose The people who most were able to do that talked about purpose in multiple areas of their life. They talked about in their personal life, in their family, not just their career. And then the reverse of that were the people who struggled the most with it were the ones who, when they tried to talk about wanting to find their purpose, is that they only saw it through the lens of their job. So finding their purpose is all about, what am I meant to do? What am I supposed to do with work? And those are the ones who most struggled. And so that was actually the most like aha moment for me of, okay, so if we're going to do this work, we have to actually start with the whole person, right? This isn't just about career development, as Brian, we have to look at the whole person. How do we do that? And so through it, you'll see in your little booklet, most of you are probably already there, but there's a circle, and it's basically like our start from purpose model. And what we identified was that if you look, purpose is at the core, and there were 6 key areas of our life that when connected to purpose, we found that people felt, and we describe it as, they were living out their purpose, or living from purpose, or feeling purposeful in their life. A lot of the words that we would hear people describe purpose was wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves. That was like a big overall theme across the board. The other one was being described as feeling fulfilled. So like, I want to have a life where I feel fulfilled. That to me looks like purpose. I'm fulfilled in all these areas. And then again, this idea of calling or destiny, or where I'm supposed to end up. And so when we looked at that, we identified these 6 areas. And we're going to break down each one of those, and what does that mean to connect our purpose to it, and then how does that actually impact our career, and how does that impact our life, and why it's important. So we'll go through each one of those, and then we'll do a little bit of some exercise at the end as well. So the first one you'll see on there is balance. That might look funny. A lot of people find that one, like, what does that have to do with my purpose? Why are we talking about balance? Well, so balance I didn't realize was such a contentious word. When I first started going and doing work on balance, I had so much pushback. I had a lot of people get very angry with me, like, balance isn't real. It's people like you who try to talk on balance that makes it worse, because then we think we're supposed to achieve this place of balance, and it's impossible. And then I had others who were just like, there's no such thing as balance. It's a lie and it's a myth, right? Really strong emotions. And then we would have others who talked about longing for it, but it was impossible for them. And so we found that balance is really key to start with. So anytime we're working with people, we start with balance. And the main reason why is the same reason is connected to if you ever go to an emergency room and you are bleeding out, we have to go through the exact same process. So if anyone here has ever watched Grey's Anatomy, ER, way back in the day, but something like that, then you know that if someone comes to the emergency room and you're bleeding out, or you have to stabilize the person, you have to triage them before you can typically actually do like the real work to help fix the core issue. And so that is what we have to do with balance. Because usually when we've got people come to us, they're overwhelmed, they're on the verge of burnout, I can't take anymore, and I deeply need this place of balance in my life before we can get into any of the core and the root stuff. And our myth around balance, I think, is because we don't really identify and understand what it is. So when you think of balance, typically how our brains see it is we think of scales. So you'll even see on the picture there some scales. And if you were to represent balance to me, show me what you would do with your hands. What does balance look like? Like this, okay? But it's about here. We imagine that balance looks like this, right? The problem is that we believe that balance means that we start from this place, and now my job is to, as weight is added to each one of these, I've got to make sure it stays in balance. But I start from the same place, and I've got to make sure I keep this even. And that's not realistic. That's not how we start. None of us are dealt these scales. In fact, I've yet to find one person who says to me, I feel like I'm dealt this to begin with, and so it's semi-easy to balance it. And sometimes you're dealt various things. Maybe you're dealt a worse scale at home, in the sense that maybe you're like, look, my partner and I both have very competing jobs. They're very demanding. We travel, and we've got kids. Like, it's just difficult. And so anytime I've got additional stuff that comes up with work and anything extra added, I actually have to figure out how to juggle that whole side of my life, and that's hard. Or maybe I'm a single parent, and so I'm like struggling to even know because I'm on my own on this. And then sometimes we have the opposite. Sometimes we're dealt a really uneven hand in our work. You know, maybe it's something that's like, I just took over a project that is drowning, that my job is to basically come in here and try and save it, and we're already behind, and I have no idea if we can actually do this. I've worked with executives who I'm like, they're going through M&As, and they're like, I just was dealt something that if I don't fix this in a short amount of time, I have a massive amount of people who lose their jobs, and that weighs on me every day. And then I have to go home at night and, you know, pretend like I can be like fully present in that space, and that's hard. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves when we're trying to achieve balance of what skills am I dealt in this season, because they change, and make those adjustments and putting healthy boundaries in place and being able to communicate, hey, this is what I've got going on right now, and I'm going to have to be honest about what I say yes to, because every time I say yes, I'm saying no to something else. And no doesn't mean never. And so it's important for us to look at balance in that way, that we can actually start from that place of identifying our core values and our purpose, so that we can actually then show up and then be able to put those healthy boundaries in place that align with those values. And at the end of the day, we can say, hey, I know I made the right choice for me. It's grounded in my purpose. And so the next one we go into is this idea of meaning. And this is where people are connected to that, I want to be something like part of something bigger than myself, right? And so that's a deep calling that we've got. Some people equate this to spirituality. Some people describe it as a faith practice, and others are about volunteering or being a part of something that they could give back to. So it can look very different, but all of us are looking for that place. And it's important for you to really connect to within your purpose, what does that look like for you? And when we can identify and put ourselves into that, that's when we start actually being able to work from a place of, it's not about what I accomplished today or even this next year, it's about the work that I'm doing as part of something that's going to last. And if we can learn how to see that, then that actually is a huge shift for us mentally in our capacity and how we look at the work we do. And then the next one you look at there is connection. And so this one was really key. All of the participants who showed strong levels of that living fulfilled, living from purpose, talked about having strong purpose in their relationships. And it was about how they showed up in their relationships, being really intentional in that, and how their purpose was connected to it. And this is a really important thing for me. I love getting to work with people because I often will ask first, hey, how do you want to show up in the key relationships in your life? How do you want them to see you? How do you want them to think about you? What's the language you want them to use when you walk away or you're not with them? What are the things that you want your partner or maybe your children to actually say about you? What are the memories you want them to have in those connections? And then I'll ask, okay, this isn't about shaming, but how do you actually feel like you are today? What does that look like? And then identifying the disconnect, okay, so how do we solve for it? Because we're really busy. It goes back to that balance piece. But if we actually ground ourselves into this purpose and we start from there, then that helps us, allows us to be really intentional about our friendships, our community, and our family, all of these relationships that are really important, and being able to work and live from that place. And then the next one we go into is resilience. Resilience is really important because it's actually one of the biggest skills that we saw make the biggest difference during the pandemic. In general, resilience is a really important skill that we develop. However, we haven't done a great job at that over the last several years and decades, and it really showed in 2020. But I want to take you back to a story of an admiral who was part of the Vietnam War. His Admiral Stockdale. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of the Stockdale Principle, but basically he was a prisoner of war and within Vietnam, and there were thousands and thousands of prisoners of war, but only a handful came home from Vietnam. And they were interviewing this person, Jim Stockdale, and they were asking, hey, what's the difference? Why did some people make it and others didn't? And he said, oh, that's easy. They were the optimists. And they're like, oh, it's like people who were optimistic made it. And he said, no, actually, it were the optimists that didn't make it. And he said, the thing is, they would come into the camps and they would immediately start saying, like, we're going to be home by Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving would come and it would go. But we're going to be back by Christmas. Christmas would come and it would go. And and then it was Easter, and spring, and summer. And eventually, because none of those things happened, they would die of a broken heart. And he said it's a really important lesson to learn because we mustn't confuse our faith that no matter what, we will prevail in the end, with the harsh reality that we have to be willing to confront whatever it is that we're facing, no matter how difficult it is. And that was really key to me of those differences and how we look at resilience. Resilience is really tied to, I have to be able to look at my situation realistically, but also know that I am tied to a greater purpose. The reason I'm doing it, no matter how difficult, whatever circumstance comes at me, it's tied back to this. So I will make it through. I'm committed to making it through because it's tied back to my deeper purpose. It's tied back to something much greater than just about what's happening today. And I think we saw that a lot in 2020. There was a big depression that happened right around December in the pandemic last year. And what they attributed it to is that so many people, like the Stockdale principal, said that we would be out of this. We'll be out within 8 weeks. We'll be back in the office. And that didn't happen. We'll be back in the office by summer. Oh, by the fall, by the time kids go back to school, things will be back to normal by that time. And little by little, it got to the holidays, and it was actually one of the highest rates that were going on, right? I think peaked around the holidays last year. And I think it was this depression that basically sunk in of, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, and I didn't expect to still be here. And for a lot of people, they couldn't wrap their head around that. And they didn't have the resilience to be able to say, yes, this is hard, we didn't expect this, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to come through on the other side and see it through. So resilience is really important because we're all going to go through struggles and hard times. None of us will escape that, but having a deep sense of purpose in the midst of those is actually what draws us through. And then the last two are also really important. We talk about courage, and then we'll go into well-being. But courage is really tied to our ability to make choices that are aligned with our values. A lot of this has to do with our work. So how willing are we to take risks? How willing are we to have hard conversations? How willing are we to be vulnerable in the midst of challenges, right? How are we going to show up and lead others? And how am I going to be working amongst people, with my peers, with my clients? And it's really about how do I make sure I live true to who I am, my core values, regardless of the cost, and being able to choose from that place. And so that's a lot of a deeper work we do from a career standpoint, but it's really important to be grounded in those core values so that everything you do is actually operationalized from a value standpoint. And then lastly is well-being. Well-being is really important because I can't tell you how many people I've sat across from who have gone through their career, and I would say probably are reaching almost like a pinnacle of their career. Their family life is in a great place. They have, they have the vacation homes, they have the title, they have the income, all of this stuff. And that they sit there and tell me, that they realize they could lose it all because they had a heart attack recently, or because they have cancer, right? They are struggling with depression or their mental health and their overall well-being. And that has been a key thing, is that I've seen people go through all of these things and forget our health and our wellness. And that's a really important one, and I never thought about this connected to our purpose until I started doing this work. I always thought of like my health and my wellness more about goals, so to speak, right? I'll share my own experience within this. So I struggled for a long time wanting to get back to my early 20s body. And let me just say I'm not in my 20s. And so life has happened and changed. I'm not that person. It's not what's ever going to happen. But I would get really frustrated, and I would go on all these diets, and I would work out really hard, and I would do everything I could to try and get back to 24-year-old Kristen's body and weight. And then it wouldn't happen. I'd get frustrated, I'd get irritated, and I would just give up, and I'd go back to eating junk food and stopping my workout plan, and then I'd get discouraged, I'd gain a lot more weight, and then crap, I gotta start over. But it was always to try and get to that. And it just wasn't gonna happen. And it wasn't until I started doing this work on purpose and I started thinking, okay, what do I want my life to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, whatever. What do I want my life to look like? Okay, if that's the case, what is actually going to keep me from being able to do that? I want to be able to travel. I want to be very active with my kids and with my grandkids. I want to be able to not be limited by my physical capabilities. I had several family members who were debilitated, couldn't walk anywhere, were in wheelchairs just because they had not taken care of themselves. And heart disease in my family, so I was like, okay, if I want to actually have a life that looks like this down the road, I have to start making decisions today, because it aligns with what I know my core purpose is. It has nothing to do about what external factors this looks like, or about a small goal like looking like myself, 15 years ago. And that was a huge shift for me, because then it was no longer about, okay, I'm making this decision so that I can hopefully lose 5 or 10 pounds. It was about, I want to be able to do this so that I'm not limited by all the things I know that I really want to do in my life and I'm called to do. It's part of who I am, because I physically can't do that. And so I have to start making those decisions today. And so I often tell people, you've got to make sure that you've got a purpose behind your health. And that will shift it's a game changer. Because then it's actually about, the long haul here, right? Like, I'm not in this for my 400 sprint here. I'm here for like the marathon. So what do I've got to do to be able to pace myself to be able to actually finish the race? So that's kind of the wheel that we're looking at here, and we're going to dive into more of like practical exercises now. I'm putting this into practice for you guys' own life. So if you turn the page, we're going to go through some exercises. And the first one is our core values. All right, so our values are really important. A lot of times we have a bunch of words we call our values, and they're really just feel-good words. Because if 10 words are on your list, then you don't really have values, you just have a bunch of feel-good stuff, right? Because if everything is important, then nothing's actually important. So I usually tell people you've got to actually narrow down to 2 to 3 core values. Because when you get to that finite number, that's where you can really put them into practice. And they can really be tested. And then what I found is that it's actually in those 2 or 3 where the rest of the words that I also circled and wanted to be out there get tested. So for example, it really bothered me not to put family in my core values. That was really hard. But one of my core values is intentional. And I realized it was actually in that core value of intentional that my family gets tested, right? I have to often decide when I get opportunities of do I go travel or to go do this? I have to think, okay, how am I being intentional on this? What are the places that I've said that I don't compromise on when it comes to family and with my personal life and the things that are important to me? And some of the things I'm going to have to say no to, because I need to be really intentional, not reactive to something, right? And also understand, I don't need to have a scarcity mindset behind it. There will be more opportunities. It's okay. And so I want you all, you're going to go through and you're going to choose 2 to 3 core values. Now, to make it easier, because this is usually where people are like, I can't do that. Choose all the words you want, okay? So if you want to write down 5 or 10 words initially, that's totally fine. But you're going to have to narrow it down to 2 or 3. In the very back here, there are lists that you are welcome to reference. Don't be limited by this. They're just examples. It's just for, kind of get the creative juices flowing. But go ahead and start thinking about what are your core values. You'll have a few minutes to work on this. And if anyone needs a pen, raise your hand. We do have pens in the back. one more minute. You can always continue it on as well. Okay, I know some of you may need additional more time, so I do encourage you to continue digging into this, because it's a really, it can be a really deeply transformational process when you really have to identify those values and then even put them into operational practice, so to speak, where you understand what are the behaviors that actually look like living these values out. What does it look like when I'm compromising on my values? When you really dig into that, it starts to really shift in how you make decisions and how you show up. So the next thing you want to do is you're going to list 3 of your passions. So things that bring you excitement. What are the things that maybe you get lost in time doing? And it feels like you can do them all the time. And so identify those 3 passions. And again, you can write more, but try and think of what those look like. It doesn't have to be connected to work. It can be personal, it can be professional, but just narrow down to those 3. Again, if you're having a hard time, reference the appendix in the back for ideas, and get you some creative ideas going. Okay, and then list 3 of your strengths and your talents. These are things that people oftentimes can give you for advice on. Maybe things that are easy for you that other people find challenging, but things that you know are your innate strengths and talents that you bring into situations. I also tell people, like, make sure to choose ones that you enjoy doing. I've had some people say, like, well, people tell me I'm good at accounting, and I'm like, well, do you like it? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, then don't list that. Like, make sure that's something you want to enjoy doing. So the next 2, I'm going to have you try and do them in tandem a little bit. But the next 2 boxes are how do you see your passions, as well as your strengths and talents show up in your daily life, with work, in your relationships, your family, your friends. All of those things. How do you see your passions and your strengths show up? And also, how do you see your values coming to life through your strengths and your talents and the things that you do in your life? They don't have to be any type of grand thing. It's often in the little tiny moments that actually build up over time that really are how we start to see our values and our passions and everything come out in our daily life. I know that's a hard one, so you might have to continue digging into that one. The next thing you're going to do is write a purpose statement for your life. I often tell people this is a living and breathing thing, so don't get too hung up on it has to be perfect. You're going to walk away from it and probably think on it, revisit it, maybe add a little bit here and there, right? Reshape it, and that's okay. I just say don't expect it to change drastically over time, right? But more of kind of this like true north kind of guiding spot we use. The other thing that's important is that it should not represent just your career, right? So like if this statement you write only ends up sounding like you're telling me like your elevator pitch of like what you do or what you want to do, then you've done it wrong. You've missed the point of the exercise. It really needs to encompass every area of your life. When we looked at that circle, it needs to be something that can connect back to that. And more importantly, it needs to be something that even if you were to leave your job or your career, your industry today, you would be able to still live this out. right? That I can show up in this no matter what my circumstances are. I can live from that place. At the very back, there's some examples. Sometimes it helps people because they're like, I don't know where to even begin, and they can look very different. Some are a couple sentences long, some are short. But like one of the ones on the back that I really love is a participant I had in the past went through this, that I asked for permission, I just loved it as an example, is to be a bringer of joy to my community, displaying light in my work, family, and every environment I step into, so I can lift others up to become all they were created to be. And I love that because it really is about, for her, it was about how do I actually, every room I go in, I want it to be something that I bring light to it, even in dark places, even in hard places, and that I can show people how they can come to the fullness of who they were meant to be. So that was like one, right? And then others are totally different. One person wrote, to live as a son first, a husband, father second, and a servant leader in all I do. So just make sure it just speaks to you. And I say, look back over the values you wrote down, the passions, your strengths, how they show up, and pull from that to create that statement. So I'll give you 5 minutes or so to do that. So we're going to have to wrap up here, but I encourage you to continue doing this work, refine it, go back and revisit it. I also encourage you to share it with other people, maybe here before you leave with someone, or with somebody who's close to you. But really dive into it and try not to let it be something we stuff in our pocket or in our purse and go on and we look at again, but let it be something that can really kind of help shape and form as you move forward in life. The idea is that, what we love to help, I love to help people work on with this is, okay, once you've identified that, now look at all of these places in your life and how are you actually able to start doing that today? We actually have a lot more opportunities to live true to our purpose and our values than we think. It often doesn't require, chopping our hair off or moving across the world or quitting our job. But it's more about actually looking at how do I start putting these little things in practice. And now sometimes it does look like us actually evaluating and thinking the way my life is and what's happening right now doesn't line up with my values. It doesn't let me live this fully. So, okay, well, now let's start thinking about how you can actually make shifts to allow you to be intentional in those places. That's what I would encourage you to do walking away from here. But just don't let it stop, let it continue. But I really appreciate you all engaging in the process. I hope it has been at least a little bit of some insight and aha to your own life and what's inside you and what you're capable of. But it's been a pleasure to be with you all today. I will leave like a minute or two if you have questions. I'll also be around for a little bit, feel free. But thank you so much for having me. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you.